Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. We are here today to talk about the dangerous game that Wizards of the Coast is playing with companions. I don't think they fully realize the repercussions of the actions that they are undertaking. Now, the root of the problem, actually, before we get to the root of the problem, I suppose we should specifically talk about what companions are. I've talked about these in previous videos, and people have left comments indicating they wished that I had shown an example. So let's put the most egregious offender of all the companions up on the screen right now. What you're looking at is the Lurrus of the Dream Den. Without a doubt, the most busted of the companions, at least by current standards. So all the companions share the concept that they have hybrid mana cost. So the mana cost of this is 2 hybrid, white, black, and 1. So you can cast this in a white deck, you can cast this in a black deck, you can cast this in a white-black deck. What do you get for your 3 mana? You get a legendary creature Cat Nightmare that is 3/2 with lifelink and an ability that says during each of your turns, you may cast 1 permanent spell with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard. Now that's a pretty potent ability to have on a card. And on the surface, if that's all it said on this card, it would be a fine Magic card. It would not be too strong at all. It would be good, but not too good. The problem comes in with the companion mechanic. Now, you'll see beside the word companion, it says each permanent card in your starting deck has converted mana cost 2 or less. If this card is your chosen companion, you may cast it once from the outside the game. So basically, the idea behind this is a card that snuggles down inside your sideboard and exists outside of the normal rules of Magic the Gathering. What this does is it acts as an 8th card in your hand. As long as you're building by the rules of the companion mechanic, then you get to the advantage of having this off to the side and starting the game with it. So the Lurrus here, it does preclude you from putting copies of itself into your deck. Like if you're going to use the Lurrus as your companion, that means you can't put regular copies of the Lurrus into your deck because each of them have a casting cost of 3 and everything in your deck has to cost 2 or less in terms of permanence. Now here's the thing, even with a restriction on this Lurrus saying, look, if you play me as your companion, you can't have other copies of in your deck. Basically, you don't get access to 4 ofs, you have access to a 1 of. And yet still, the Lurrus is absolutely dominating. This is a companion card that tons of people are opting to use. Now, why is that? It's because it breaks a fundamental rule of Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering only has a few fundamental rules. What are they? They're things like you have to have a deck of at least 60 cards. You have to start your game with exactly 20 life. You get to draw 1 card a turn and lay 1 land a turn. And you get to start with 7 cards in your opening hand. Now you're allowed to throw your hand back and shuffle it in and grab a new hand. But what do you have to pay to do that? You lose a card from your hand. Why is that? Because that is a significant cost. Now the Lurrus, not the Lurrus, sorry, but the companions, all of the companions, basically break this rule and say you get to start the game with an 8th card. Not just with an 8th card, but you absolutely know what that 8th card is going to be and can plan around it. So for the first time in Magic, not only can you start with an 8-card hand, but you get to actively select what the 8th card is. Now this has had a dramatic impact on a number of levels of Magic. We're talking maybe not Oko levels of dramatic impact because Oko was crazy times, right? But either way, the impact is very noticeable. The Lurrus and Karuga as well, I believe. But the Lurrus mainly, they're making their way in, these companions are making their way into older formats. Modern, even as like old school vintage with the Black Lotus. Like this card is powerful enough that it's making headway into the oldest Magic formats. Now, this is in line with what Wizards wants in some ways. They have changed their design philosophy. How it used to work was they had research and development, and they've foregone the idea of research and development, and created something. I believe the name of it is the Vision team now, and they have a design philosophy called Fire. And Fire is basically like, it should be fun and interesting and crazy and whatever. But ultimately what Fire leads to is a very pushed power level. That's the point, is they want cards to shake up other formats. They don't care if they're printing busted stuff for older formats. Well, actually, no. The old mentality was they didn't really care if they printed stuff that messed up older formats as long as standard was relatively balanced. Like the old way they did things was keep standard balanced. If older formats get unbalanced by that, oh well, that's fine. If they become too unbalanced, we'll just kind of ban them, right? And they even used to use a power balancing philosophy. You could see it in action. One of the most obvious times for that was during the time of the original Mirrodin block. The original Mirrodin block was extremely powerful. So they balanced that out against Kamigawa. You know what I mean? It's kind of like watering something down. Oh, this juice is too powerful. Let's water it down. So Mirrodin was power juice. Kamigawa was weakened so that it would kind of dilute overall standard and keep it at a rough power level. And they had maintained this philosophy for a long time. If you want a more recent example of it, Kaladesh was really strong and overpowered. And we saw a bunch of banning in standard after we hadn't seen banning in standard, I should say, for years. Like we had gone years without a standard ban. And then Kaladesh pushed the bar. We ended up with a bunch of bannings. And then the Ixalan block kind of like walked it back, took the power level down a little. And that's the way it would go. Ebb and flow, ebb and flow. But that wasn't with the Fire mechanic. That was the Fire design concept, I should say, not mechanic, right? Thinking of Companion. Companion is an offshoot of the Fire mechanic. It's something where they're like, let's push the power envelope. But they've pushed it too far. And this is happening too frequently now. I mean, we went from 2020 causing problems in standard to Throne of Eldraine causing problems in standard. And now here we are 2 sets later. And what do we have? We have more problems courtesy of Ikoria. Now, Theros was a little bit of like a dull point, but I don't think that was by design. I don't think that they were like, let's take things down. Theros, I wouldn't call underpowered, but it doesn't have the same like kick down the door level of power. It's more like, all right, whatever. But either way, Theros didn't really have the dilution effect of power, especially considering the way it worked before was we would have a powerful block followed up by a weak block. So that would be 3 sets that were strong, 3 sets that were weak, and it would kind of mesh out. Now it's just like a 1-to-1-to-1, right? So if you do a powerful set, and it's basically like power weak, power weak, power weak, but Wizards isn't doing that anymore. They're going power, 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 power. And this is going to come back to bite them in a number of ways. And in one big way, financially. Because if you think about this stuff in terms of the secret layers, what's the idea behind secret layer? And I don't mean the surface idea they're trotting out to us. What's the idea internally at Wizards that they will never actually vocalize because it would be incredibly unwise for them to vocalize it? The idea behind secret layers is really, it allows them to look at the secondary market and cards that have high value and turn around and print them and sell them directly to the consumer. In the past, the way to get to sell singles to players was to put them into sets, right? You would go, okay, you know what, we're gonna take a few old awesome cards and we're gonna use them to juice this set up. And we used to get more of that, in all honesty, in the past. And that basically goes, look at all these awesome desirable cards that also have a nice financial value. Here you go, we put them in the set. It pushes sales. You saw them try that with the fetch lands in Tarkir, although they branded that a mistake. They don't like the idea of you being able to get a fetch land for like $5-6, because that's how cheap fetch lands got. Now that's the perfect example. Look at fetch lands now. What was the most recent reprinting of fetch lands? Secret Layer. And how much did they charge? Almost about $200 bare minimum. And once you add in the stores jacking the prices up, these fetch lands end up going for $400 for 5 cards. So the Secret Layer is Wizards' ability to print directly from the secondary market. Now, what drives a lot of the secondary market prices? Most of the secondary market prices are determined by the usability and desirability of a card. So when cards are in standard, a lot of them will be at the peak of their price because most of these cards aren't going to make it to these older formats, right? It's just not going to happen. You're going to end up with a scenario where, okay, it was good in standard, but these older formats like vintage, modern, legacy, all this stuff, they have a more entrenched style of all these different decks that exist out there, like an ecosystem that's much harder to disrupt unless you push the power level. And they're succeeding. They're succeeding in getting these cards out into modern vintage, but I don't think they realize that this is the goose that lays the golden egg, that whole fable where it's like somebody owns the goose and it lays golden eggs and they think to themselves, I'm gonna get all the golden eggs right now. And they take the goose out, open it up and go, there's no golden eggs in here. What happened? And it's like, yeah, you could have had a lifetime supply of golden eggs if you had managed things properly. So older formats like modern and things like that, they appeal to people for multiple reasons. One is a wider card base, but one of the really big things that people end up playing modern in these older formats for is because it allows them to use the cards they already possess. It allows them to spend less money overall. They may have to fork out more money at the onset to build a modern deck, but once you build a modern deck or these older decks, those formats tend to be more stable. There are less shakeups because people get sick of running in the standard treadmill where you play standard. Wizards basically goes, okay, cards are obsolete, you can't use them anymore, buy new cards. And you constantly have to be paying Wizards. And if you want to play competitively, you have to buy the most expensive cards. Oh, look, we put out a new Mythic Teferi. They're $70 each, like the Dominaria Day. So just 4 copies of one card for your deck is going to run you almost $300. People get sick of that, so they migrate to these older formats where they don't have to deal with that because they're more stable. Now, Wizards completely destabilizes these formats with new cards and then bans other cards around it that completely obliterate existing archetypes. Like Mox Opal getting the axe pretty much was the death knell for Affinity, right? Affinity used to be a big thing in Modern, and now, good luck. Good luck playing a proper Affinity deck, right? So it's not a problem if a particular deck disappears from the meta. That's fine. But metas need to be more defined by shifts in the player base and things like that, and like coming up with new concepts and strategies, as opposed to like, here's one brand new card or one brand new card type that's going to completely change the face of what we're looking at. It causes instability in these older formats. And without these older formats, the price of a lot of these cards is not going to be what it's at. Modern is very good for keeping the price of cards higher based on demand, right? That's why when we saw with Modern Masters, when they went ahead and reprinted Tarmogoyf, at first, instead of decreasing the price of Tarmogoyf, it pushed it upwards as people acquired Tarmogoyfs and were like, well, now I've got a Tarmogoyf or 2. I want to get a playset and play with these sort of thing. So you've got a scenario where the prices of these cards, the older cards and things like that, are pushed upwards by being relevant in these formats, and these formats have a certain level of stability that make people feel more comfortable spending $100 a card. If you completely bust the format over and over, like Oko made it into vintage, Luris making it into vintage, you shouldn't be affecting the oldest, most stable formats with every set you make. They may be giddily over there going, oh, hey, look at that. Look, we've been able to push some extra sales for this stuff for these older formats. But if you destroy those older formats and fewer people play them, then you no longer have that upwards push on the value of cards. In fact, it has quite the opposite, where the only factors that will be left to push up card prices will be standard, which is a very temporary sort of thing, and Commander. And Commander definitely does have a price effect on things, but it is a very slow and steady thing that can't be banked on. And Wizards is also trying to disrupt Commander as well. So this companion thing, where they fundamentally shift the rules of the game in an attempt to push out into other formats, and like FIRE is the proper acronym for it, because that's essentially what they're doing. They're setting fire to the house and going, oh, I'm so warm right now. This is great. Yeah, you're warm for the moment, but when your house burns down, you're out in the cold. That's really what it boils down to. So if they keep pushing in this way, it's going to be a real problem for them and their ability to sell secret layers. Because if you don't have high secondary market on these secret layer cards, you're not really going to be able to sell them the same way. And there's only so much money you can get from trying to sell people lands with Godzilla on it, right? That's only going to appeal to a particular like subset of the customer base. Really, Secret Lair operates mostly off of being able to go, well, go look at the secondary market of these cards. We're giving you a deal and selling you them direct. So Wizards is essentially just shooting themselves in the foot with this. You know, that's the scenario. That's my opinion on the subject. I am curious to hear yours, so let me know in the comments below. I want to give a big shout out to my patrons and channel members. We are welcoming a new patron to the scroll. Welcome, Lazy Corn Bum. And if you're watching this video wondering why the name I said doesn't match the name you put on Patreon, I can't put that name in my scroll. All right, if you want to know why, go look at the message I sent you on Patreon. But thanks for signing up. So, to all of you I say, thanks for coming by, and I will see all of you lovely people very soon.